All right. I think it's time to start. It's 2 past 11 or 12, wherever you are, in what time zone. But let's start this webinar titled Doxing as a New Tool in the Russian Influence Operations. My name is Pekka Kallioniemi. I will be moderating this event. Those who don't know who I am, I have created a comprehensive database on Russian disinformation narratives and people who spread them in a project called Vatnik Soup. Our today's panelists, other panelists are Anastasia Morozova from frontstory.pl, Kacper Rekavec, International Center for Counterterrorism, and Maciej Broniarz from Decode 9. I hope I didn't slaughter all of those names. If I did, apologies. But let's first initially go through the structure of today's webinar. So first we're gonna hear from Kacper on introduction to the topic of doxing and the research on the topic by ICCT. Then Anastasia will talk about their investigation done by V-Square and Reporters Foundation on this topic. And then Maciej will expand on the technical aspects of doxing and data used for the investigation. And then I'm gonna ask some question as a moderator from all the panelists, and then in the end we're gonna do a short 10-minute Q&A, so you can ask your questions from the panelists. But let's start with Kacper. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Pekka. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Fundacja Reporterów. And obviously I'll be speaking to you as one of the, representing an institution that is now involved in a project on doxing, which we are running with Fundacja Reporterów as well, and we'll tell you all about that. So I'll try and share my screen to show what I've got for you today. Very short presentation. Don't know if you're able to see it. Hopefully yes. Hopefully, yes, I do hope. If you don't, then let me know, Pekka and others. Essentially, I represent, as you mentioned, International Center for Counterterrorism. We are a think tank based in the Netherlands. We've been in the business for more than 15 years. And doxing in this very project is a bit of a new avenue for us because it says counterterrorism, and we obviously are in the business of counter-extremism. And usually throughout the last 20 years or so, if you were saying these words, you were looking into all sorts of places. Well, if you were in the EU or Western Europe, but not necessarily at Russia. I think it's wrong. We think it's wrong. We're mending our ways in this sense. So obviously this project kind of bridges some of the different lands, so to speak. And we're very happy to be joined by Fundacja Reporterów, and Anastasia will tell you more about the insights on the project that we did on Russian doxing against pro-Ukraine foreign fighters, and mostly foreign fighters, but also people who deliver humanitarian aid or assistance for Ukraine after 2022, what this doxing is, how it happens, what happens, and what exactly takes place. Before I actually start with my presentation, I would ask you to log into this. This is a Mentimeter survey, and you have the code for the Mentimeter there. This is basically because we are mandated by the European Media and Information Fund to do this. So we'd like to actually see if our projects make sense and to what extent. There will be another Mentimeter after Anastasia's presentation. So this is the kind of like an entry point to see where are you guys coming from in terms of like to this very discussion. So please take a moment to maybe scan it. I strongly advise you. It makes our job easier, and it actually makes our donor happy. And as I said, it's the European Media and Information Fund that is helping us in this very project. So literally, something about the project that we're running: anti-dox, identifying, evaluating, and countering disinformation in times of war. This is something that we're doing with Anastasia's outfit, Fundacja Reporterów, or Reporters Foundation / frontstory.pl in Poland. Do look them up. This is to assess what kind of doxing understood as basically unveiling of one's private information, sharing it online, but also with malicious intent and in malicious context. our intention is to map out the doxing that has been unveiling against the as I mentioned, the pro-Ukraine foreign fighters since 2022, and what has happened to them, who's running this doxing, who's behind it, and how connected it is to the Russian state. Now, we wouldn't be doing this had it not been for previous examples of doxing. Now, if you like movies, you might have seen the sacred seed, the seeds of the sacred fig, which was in the running for Palme d'Or in Cannes in 2024. It's an Iranian movie. So this is very much the graphic that you see there. This is the last, if I'm talking previous examples of doxing, this is the last example. So this is an example, which I think a good example, inverted commas as well, because after the protests in 2022, 2023 in Iran, many of the security officials of the Iranian theocratic regime, their details were unveiled online by the protesters, obviously in a context which wasn't favorable to them. So you can see basically now doxing being part of pop culture in this sense. And if you see this movie, it is about a security official whose data gets doxed. He gets doxed and his data is out there. And basically him and his family are running away from a non-state doxing in this sense. Now, our project is about a presumed and assumed state doxing, so to speak, connected to the Russian war machine against Ukraine. But if you're thinking doxing and maybe some other examples how this phenomenon was unveiling, I mean, I can at least think of 3. There's many more in the publications that will be coming up later this month on this issue from us, like a final report in this project. There are others available online at icct.nl. So there are at least 3. There is doxing coming from the far right. Organizations such as, or extreme right, organizations such as the Sonnenkrieg division or Atomwaffen division, so the kind of like precursors of the militant Nazi accelerationist extreme right, they've been doxing their enemies and one another if they suspected someone of betrayal. So this is one side of the defense. Then there is 764. 764, it's essentially a pedophile ring that doxes kids, exposes them, or tries to expose them to some manipulation, and then basically forces them into a pedophile ring, sending more photos, sending videos, humiliating oneself, and then using this as a compromat, basically a compromising material against a given individual. So this is one side of defense, and 764 is connected to the extreme right. Then you have the extreme left doing it, and if you actually follow the work of Amar Amarasingam in Canada, he was looking at the far left doxing of the extreme right. And one of his interviewees once famously said that this actually doxing helped him change his life. He was doxed by the far left. This unleashed a certain process which led to him kind of basically realizing that he's doing things wrong and his life is not where it should be. And it actually helped him change his ways. You know, that's a positive example, but majority of it is felt by those activists on the far right in a completely different manner. And then the last example I wanted to mention, there was even a website in the United States run by Candace Owens, who was called a very smart thinker by Donald Trump. And she essentially established a website in which you could go, provide some info on someone whom you didn't like or whom you think was doing bad things against you, literally. And she would upload this stuff against that very person and float it online as a kind of like a commercial service. This is commercial doxing, really, that we're looking at. So plenty of other examples of doxing in the world. And now a very quick introduction as to what we're doing and how we came across what Anastasia will tell you more about in her presentation. So essentially, we are looking at state doxing. The photo you see here is of Jean-François Rattel. I'll get to him in a second. But essentially, you know, I've been studying the foreign fighters who fight for Ukraine since 2014. And very early in the full-scale war in 2022, in the conversations I had with them, and I spoke to more than 80 by now, they were telling me about the fact that they were on the channels. And at first, I mean, I didn't get that phrase really. And when something like second or third told me, I'm on the channels, I asked him, what is it that he meant? It turns out that he meant doxing. There are channels out there on Telegram that are more or less connected to Russia. I'll tell you more about it in a second, and so will Anastasia, that basically unveil the details of foreign fighters who are fighting for Ukraine, widely sharing them, and they're building up, trying to build up a kind of like an international audience for that very phenomenon, sharing all sorts of data of these fighters. Of course, in a malicious context, very malicious comments out there, homophobic, anti-Semitic, transphobic, what have you, and everyone who's out there is called a mercenary, and everyone who's out there is called a Nazi. Even though they're not mercenaries, they're not Nazis. So essentially, to give you the flavor. Now, some of these fighters take it lightly. They say, I'm being shot at every day on the front lines. I will not take this too seriously because nothing happens to me. I'm on the front line, so hey, what will it matter? Until we get to the case of Jean-François Rattel, the Canadian volunteer who actually went on these channels to argue back, saying, you're saying wrong things about me, that's not me, you're doing it wrong, this is wrong, la 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 la. And then he's killed in suspicious circumstances. He's killed in suspicious circumstances a few miles from the front. Something falls, something actually hits him from, basically launched from a drone that passes nearby. And now, obviously, many people are asking questions if this was a coincidence. And one of the volunteers who actually worked out there in eastern Ukraine and has known Jean-François Rattel, who himself was a pretty interesting and, let's say, colorful figure, if you like, told me one thing, interesting thing that puts all of this in context. We have a project to unmask doxing. And this volunteer told me maybe there is someone who actually has a project, just like we do, but supported by the Russian state, not by European Media and Information Fund, to actually track these people and actually offer them as bounty or as targets to the Russian military. She suggested some level of interconnection and some level of sophistication how this is done. But essentially, if you go on these channels and you argue back and you leave a digital trace on these very channels, you might end up in big, big trouble. Jean-François is an example. You might be asking, how do I know this? Well, his death was announced on these channels before it was announced by the Canadian media. So that suggests a certain, let's say, coordination between the two sides of the coin. And now the final point I really wanted to make is the fact that how do we know and how do we suspect that this is done by the Russians? I mean, Anastasia will have more on this, but one example, the Russian war bloggers, not only the war bloggers, but also the Russian newspapers. And if you believe there are Russian newspapers out there in Russia which are independent, you would be wrong. And their equivalent, and I say this with a laugh, of Russian BBC, they are quoting from these channels. And they are saying that these channels are doing a good work. And one of them even refers to them as our eagle eyes who are being saluted by the certain elements of the Russian media infrastructure, which obviously support the Russian war machine in this. So I'm hoping this kind of introduced the subject and kind of whetted your appetite to hear more. And I'll hand over to Pekka, who will probably hand over to Anastasia, if you don't mind, and we'll come back with one more Mentimeter after her presentation. Thank you, and I'll stop my sharing here.
Yes, very interesting. Yeah, I really don't have anything to say at this point, so let's move on to Anastasia. You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Anastasia Morozova. I work with Front Story PL. I work as a data and investigative journalist. And so we came across this story and started from researching just one of the websites, and we started looking at, as Kasper said, we started looking at how it might be connected to Russia and what are the hard proofs, because doxing itself existed in the world, as Kasper said, even long before the full-scale invasion, but at the same time, it was mostly performed by Russians and used as a technique in the war against Ukraine. And we started contacting soldiers and military people in Ukraine, asking them to describe the phenomena happening. So they told us that probably when the war broke out in 2014 in Ukraine's east, doxing was mostly for amateurs. So there were like amateurs who were supporting Russia, and they wanted to somehow discourage or frighten Ukrainian army, and they were posting some private information that they could find online. A couple of people told us that, but they mentioned also that in the course of these 10 years, it evolved to the fully developed infrastructure backed by Russia. So our goal was to discover this infrastructure and find out how precisely it is connected to Russian state. So we started with a website called Foreign Competence. Foreign Competence is kind of the Wikipedia. And here there were no surprises. It was tightly connected to Russia because Russian Ministry of International Affairs on their Facebook openly published and encouraged to follow this page and to contribute. So here we wouldn't say that those people were only amateurs. They were for sure sponsored or somehow backed by official institutions. Now I would like to share my screen and show you the infrastructure that we discovered during our investigation. So yeah, I believe you see my screen. This is our story published in English at WeSquare.org. We run this portal for Visegrad region countries, which are Slovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland. And I encourage everyone who doesn't speak Polish to read it in English. So, we started kind of reverse engineering and going to the beginning and the creation of these websites. What did we find out? So Russian state reported that the foreign competence was created by Rybar, which is a big influential Russian Telegram channel, which was at some point connected to Wagner Group and Prigozhin in Russia and even financed by Prigozhin. And What4 is another media resource. Russian Telegram channel, obviously pro-Kremlin. And behind it stands Oleg Makarov, who is kind of he's presented at different conferences as a military expert, but he's also close with Russian authorities. So we went to check how these people were connected to the resources. Another resource that we found is War Tears, and it gathers information in Russian language about soldiers. So here we have two websites. One is Foreign Competence, which publishes information and about people who somehow support Ukraine. Those are not only military people; those are also politicians from every European country, and they are accused of supporting war, supporting Ukraine for the smallest doings that they could show publicly. For example, Warsaw's mayor were added to the list after he visited Kiev and met the mayor of Kiev. And War Tears is another kind of resource. They are faking the official Ukrainian website and Telegram bot, which helps people to look for those who for civilians who are missing. So this Russian website is faking the Ukrainian resource to gather the information, but not about civilians, about the military personnel of Ukraine. So we went to the kind of back end of these resources and found out that Oleg Makarov, who runs pro-Kremlin media, registered wartears.org. And foreign competence, as we know, was publicly presented as a state-backed project. Then we asked the question, okay, some pro-Russian person registered the websites, but who is hosting? And I think Maciej will present this more in detail, but the main point here is that the servers of both of these resources are hosted by a company placed in Seychelles, and this company is offshore, so we cannot see who owns it, but managed to discover that it is linked to a Slovak company, Stormwall. And Stormwall is managed by two guys, two programmers and security experts from Russia. And there is a company in Russia called Stormwall as well. And this Stormwall was registered at Skolkovo. This is a kind of business incubator created by Russian state, and obviously every company which is registered there and which uses the infrastructure of this Skolkovo technopark is connected to the Russian state. So yeah, here is how we managed to prove that they are connected. Moreover, this Stormwall company, as we later discovered, is also connected and hosting Newsfront, a website, which is a project of Kremlin based in Crimea after it got occupied. So websites are one side of doxing in this Russian war against Ukraine. Besides that, we analyzed the Telegram channels. We analyzed the channel Track and Azimark, which I think now counts like 60,000 followers and is promoted by people like Vladimir Solovyov, who is a Kremlin's propagandist, and other Russian politicians. What we saw there is, just as Kasper mentioned, as we are revealing how doxing works, they are revealing who is involved into the war. Their aim is to expose foreign how to say this, foreign soldiers, like who are coming to Ukraine to help or to deliver humanitarian aid. And we discovered that this one is operated by a network of pro-Kremlin hackers, and but the actual job on research and on finding private data is performed by mostly by volunteers. They have a separate Telegram chat which counts 5,000 participants, and any of them can contribute to the research, and they do it for free, basically, just for the idea of so-called Big Russia. And It's worth mentioning that during our work on this project, we understood that mostly doxing is about how people leave their private data out there online, and then it is used against them. So it's worth mentioning that in most cases, the data was not leaked or somehow illegally I don't know, hacked into the servers or the place where it should be stored. It was just the information that we post on social media, that our relatives or friends post about us, that media write about us. So here it's really worth mentioning that we have to be really careful about what people can find about us online. And here I would hand over to Pekka and Maciej to tell more about how the infrastructure works.
All right. Thank you, Anastasia. I would like to remind at this point that you can actually send your questions already. There's a Q&A button on Zoom where you can send your questions. We'll go through them at the end. But let's move on to Maciej, who will talk about the technical tell us about the technical aspects of doxing.
Becca,
and
if I
data.
may, before that, sorry, Maciej, about that, can I just bring up the slide with the Mentimeter? Apologies for that, but this is for the sake of...
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Of the donor.
Please do.
So I'm bringing this up.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Come on. Thank you for this. Yeah, hope you see it again. This is the kind of, let's say, post presentations QR code and the code for the Mentimeter. It will do us a great honor and privilege.
I'm gonna grab it too. So.
Yeah, Becca, thank you. Questions aren't very difficult. Like, did you find out anything new about that stuff? So, but we would really love it if you guys could do us the honor of doing this. And I'm handing over to you, Pekka. So I guess Maciej can start. Thank you. Stopping my share.
Yes, go ahead, Maciej.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Maciej Broniarz. I am a security consultant. I basically work with incident response. So what I do is analyze the incidents and try to basically mitigate them and make them as less painful as possible. I run a company called Deco9, but in my free time, I'm the chief security officer of a certain NGO, which is a non-profit organization that basically supports NGOs in Poland and Central Europe regarding cybersecurity incidents. And based on that, I have a quite nice perspective regarding what really happens in terms of cybersecurity operations in Russia. So the topic of today's discussion is doxing. And before we switch to technical stuff, I would like for us to think for a moment about the issue that we basically don't pay much attention to, which is the trash, the physical waste that we create every day. So try to think of the stuff that you threw to your trash bin in like last 24 hours and what someone can get from basically digging through your trash once you threw it out to the container. So he can learn what you eat, he can tell if you have a pet, he can very often tell your gender, and he can tell, for example, if you are ill and if the illness is temporary or you have some severe illness that it takes years to treat. So digging through the trash can be very useful in terms of what is happening in somebody's life, and it can be done without the person knowing it. So now let's switch to the electronic part of our life and imagine a scenario. So we wake up in the morning and there is our cat lying and he looks very cute. So we make a photo of the cat. And then what happens next? The photo is on the phone and it is immediately transferred to a cloud service that you are using, whether it's Google or Apple. Basically, the photo is stored there. And then you decide that the photo is so cute that you want to share the photo with somebody, so you send it on Facebook Messenger. And it took you like 2 minutes to basically make the photo, send it, and read the reply of a friend regarding the photo. And imagine how much data and how much digital trash you actually created. Think about how many copies of the photo actually are created and how those copies are stored all over the world. So suddenly there is a system somewhere in America that has a copy of the photo with all the metadata regarding the phone that you are using, regarding the date, the location that the photo was taken, etc. So we can assume that someone in the States, without ever knowing anything about your existence, has access to the data that you have a cat and you live in a particular place in Poland, and at 9 a.m. in the morning you made a photo of a cat. And very often there are some things hidden in the photo in the background because you don't realize the context and the stuff that can be taken out of the photo. A few years ago, like 2 days before Christmas, the wife of one of the Polish government officials posted a photo of a Christmas tree. There's a large living room, a very nice Christmas tree, a cat lying somewhere beneath the Christmas tree, a regular Christmas photo that everyone makes, a bunch of those every year. And she posted the photo in social media, and it took people like 10 minutes to basically analyze where exactly does that government official lives, which balcony is his, which windows are his apartment, etc., etc. So it was done using only one single photo without any external knowledge, without any metadata, etc. Because people are able to do that regarding basically seeing what they see on the photo. And then there is a question, what can be done if those systems are basically state control? We in Central and Western Europe basically operate under the assumption that those corporations tend to keep the data to themselves. We are worried about the data being used in terms of marketing, people's profiling, etc. And that is true, that is the problem, and it's happening. But from the perspective of the Eastern Europe, the situation is a bit different. I have a bunch of friends in Russia, in Belarus, and Ukraine, and they basically all use or have been using the same social media. They contacted each other on Telegram. The main social network for them was Contacte, and they didn't see any risk regarding that. So there is a huge pile of data that is being created and archives on those systems. If you, for example, try to use Facebook and you try to distribute some adult materials, to put it mildly, on Facebook, basically your account will be blocked. On the other hand, you can store as much extreme adult materials on Telegram of Contacte, and nobody will pay attention to that, apart from probably some government official who can analyze the data, and suddenly you have a weird conversation regarding your not particular interest in adult content. So when you are, for example, using Telegram, there is lots of data that you share with the company. They know your phone number, they know your IP address, they know your phone model, etc., etc. They very often know your location. And the problem is that basically all the data stored within all of those systems can be cross-referenced and is accessible by the Russian government official. There are lots and lots of stories by the Telegram owners that they are independent and they don't pay attention to government restrictions because they believe in freedom of speech. And for anyone that lives in Central or Eastern Europe, that should be obvious that is basically bullshit, and they are just playing the long game regarding convincing people to store the data within the Telegram, ignoring the obvious fact that the data can be accessed to Roskomnadzor, which is the Russian main entity for internet censorship, and basically any Russian secret service that has need to access the data. Imagine a scenario where you use Telegram to share non-crucial information. You send pictures of your breakfast to your friends, you send Christmas wishes, etc., or you basically schedule a party on Friday evening. That is non-critical data. And on the other hand, using the same phone and the same government control infrastructure, you access a discussion board where you have an anonymous account where you post information criticizing the Putin regime. And the information from both those systems can be cross-referenced, can be checked, and suddenly someone has access to information saying that the guy that was posting lots of anti-Putin content on different discussion boards will be there on Friday evening between 9 p.m. and midnight. And basically anything can happen from there. The problem is that when we are thinking about doxing and the risk of doxing in terms of basically people being harmed, we have a Western perspective. So we worry about the stuff regarding our right to privacy, our right not to being used as an element to profile the data, etc., etc. The problem is that on our eastern border, there is a government that has basically unlimited resources and can not only request all the data from any provider that is located there, but basically can spin their own provider. Quite often I encounter Russia advanced persistent threats, basically cyber criminal groups that attack Polish government officials or Polish non-governmental organizations in terms of data theft and espionage. And they are sometimes hiding their infrastructure behind what is called a content delivery network, which is basically a company that has lots and lots of servers all over the world, and they can spread and distribute the content to all those servers. So if you want to watch a video on YouTube, you don't have to download the video from the States. You basically download it from a server like 10 kilometers away from you. And there are companies like Akamai or Cloudflare, which are basically the largest content providers in the world. And if you identify a website that is used to spread Russian-based malware or is a part of the, let's say, command and control server for a particular incident, you can contact them and they will basically take the site down, they will shut it down, and in certain scenarios they can even share some data regarding what happened and basically what they were able to analyze on that particular case. So having unlimited resources and having the issue with the Eastern European CDNs, why not create your own CDN or a bunch of those? So what Anastasia mentioned earlier, that the company that is, or a bunch of companies that are called Stormor, basically appear like being an alternative to Cloudflare that was created to allow Russia to be able to distribute malicious content on the internet without the risk of the content being taken down. So if you find a malicious content hosting on Cloudflare, you contact them, and very often within like 15-20 minutes, an hour tops, is the content is being removed and the website is being blocked. And on the other hand, despite of an obvious case of malware distribution, once you contact Stormwall, very often they just ignore your request, or they said that the site has been blocked and the site has been blocked on their particular address and it has been instantly moved to another IP. So basically you need to repeat the process, and they wear you down and decide, try to convince you to basically stop bugging them because they won't do anything in that area. So keep in mind that all the doxing analysis that we try to do from our perspective is extremely easy and you have an unlimited amount of resources and an unlimited amount of data to analyze. So it is very, very easy for the Russian officials to basically analyze the data and decide what data can be useful in terms, for example, of harming somebody. There is always a discussion when people try to say, okay, but you have a huge amount of data, so it is very, very difficult to analyze the data. They can have all the information. It will take them years to analyze the data, to basically profile a certain person, to make the certain correlations. And that was true till like about 4 years ago. Now with the AI-aided search, it is extremely easy to analyze virtually any amount of data in terms of profiling a certain person, finding certain correlations, and there are rooms and rooms of people in Russia working only on that, basically on profiling certain people and basically creating scenarios for another successful incident regarding what can be problematic for their Western neighbors, which they claim to be their enemies. Keep in mind, one last information, keep in mind that the problem is not only attacking certain person. It is always the most obvious one, but few weeks ago there was a huge report published by the Polish Secret Service about the operation that the Russia is conducting against logistics companies. So basically the companies that provide the transit of humanitarian aid, of all the equipment required by the Ukraine to withstand the Russian invasion. And the problem is that very often doxing is just the first element of the attack, because the Russian intruders tend to profile, for example, IT administrator or people who have access to IT systems in those logistics company, and then the attack on full scale begin up until now that we have information, for example, of the Russian attackers having access to security cameras in the warehouses. So they were not only able to attack a certain person, but they were also able to be able to see what is actually being done within the warehouse, what boxes are being transferred, etc., etc. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. Those were the presentations for today. Now we have time for some questions. I have a few here. We are running a little bit late with the schedule, so I'll just ask a few, and then we can go to the Q&As that you are sending. Please do send more. There's already one there, but please do send more questions. So my first question, whoever wants to take this, maybe Kacper or Anastasia. Russia is evidently spending a lot of money on these operations, and they are closely related to the Kremlin and the state. Do you think that Europe has sufficient funding to fight or counter the problem, or do you even see it as a big problem altogether?
If I may, I'll jump in, Anastasia. I think actually it is. It is not so much, maybe not doxing on its own, but doxing as leading to something. And if you study certain events that happened in Ukraine recently, where certain individuals were pressurized to take suspicious packages into military recruitment offices and basically leave them there, also on the basis some were bribed, some were blackmailed in a kind of doxing manner. And if you consider that Russia is waging effectively more and more brutal hybrid war against us in the broader West, then why not think that this scenario can creep from Ukraine to EU, NATO territory? And in a way it has already. But we're having a group of thousands of our citizens out there, people who support Ukraine in all sorts of ways, who sometimes are careless with their data, as Maciej was saying, the trash that they leave behind. Sometimes they have to because they have to fundraise. And, you have to fundraise to kind of, you show your face or you show your activities or whatever. There are obviously wiser ways maybe of doing that. But you have a couple of people who might be attempted to be pressurized by Russia into doing things for them as a potential target. I'm not saying they will do it. I'm not saying this will be successful, but that now looks differently. This is outside the war zone in Ukraine, and it can creep up on us and actually force us into some uncomfortable situations. So in this sense, we're talking education, we're talking common sense, we're talking, media literacy. I mean, we can repeat that ad nauseam, but essentially, I think it's a counterintelligence risk in the sense that it is for many countries in Europe still a human right, almost, inverted commas, to go and fight in a foreign war, provided you're not an Islamist or a jihadist. So you can go, there is no legal sanction. And of course, some of the people who went there and fought there are hailed as good guys and then people who did the right thing, honorable thing by joining the Ukrainian struggle. Fine. But, there are certain consequences. And I think we just need to be aware of that. And in this sense, I'm not sure we're looking at this. I'm not sure the security structures of Europe are looking in this direction or something like this. The current craze is the people who are recruited on Telegram, bribed to do stuff for Russia. Not so much the people who went to Ukraine and fought on the side of Ukraine. And I'll leave you with just one example. One of the attackers who beat up Mr. Volkov in Vilnius, number 2 to Navalny, he was a Polish football far-right hooligan who fought for Ukraine. I mean, it can get complicated. And I sometimes get the feeling, Pekka, when I talk to people in the West and try to explain the layers of it and how the deniability of it works, and I don't know if this is your experience, maybe yes as well, there is this kind of like, wow, for Europeans, Damascus is still closer to them than Donetsk. And we're still operating in that mentality. And I think that's an issue that we have to confront. I'll stop there. Sorry for the longish answer.
Yeah, that was a really, really insightful answer to all of you. Do you think that these doxing operations could be a precedent to, Russia has ramped up their hybrid operations on European soil. For example, in Estonia, some MPs were attacked, car windows were broken. These were done by low-level criminals who were recruited on Telegram. So is there a high risk or medium risk or any risk of using this information that is the doxing information used as a kind of a starting point for this type of violent attacks and so on, or arson or whatever, because we've already seen this, but it's mostly been targeted at factories and kind of military production. But do you believe that Russia could ramp up their attacks and use doxing as a precedent on, for example, violent attacks?
It's already happening, actually, because we need to take into consideration that there is a set of tools that the Russia has access to, and basically with every operation they decide what tools they need to use on the different steps of the process. There is an ongoing campaign by Russia APT number 29, if I remember correctly, targeting Central and Western European diplomats. And they are using communicators like WhatsApp, for example, to distribute malware and malicious content. And the problem is that people are aware that such stuff may be happening, so they are very, very cautious regarding what information they get from people that they don't know. So what Russia does is basically targeting and profiling people that are known contacts of certain diplomats or NGOs activists. They attack them first, and then using their system that have been taken over, they contact people, and suddenly you don't get the information from an unknown contact in the internet. You get the information from a person you met several times, and that person is sending you an important link because he wants to know your opinion on that. And basically they are using it to bypass our security mechanisms in terms of not trusting one another. So doxing is a problem because it's part of a larger process that is used to target and conduct successful attacks all over Europe.
Yeah, I also would like to add that the problem here, which is so the difference between this on-set attacks, I mean, like arsoning and I don't know, installing cameras to film how the humanitarian aid goes like through Europe, as we've seen in the case of people arrested, basically teenagers arrested in Poland for installing the cameras. They were arrested for that, and in case of doxing, first of all, it's not persecuted as a separate case itself. Like it can be treated as different violations, but there is no term in the book of law in Europe, such as doxing. So when doxing is happening in Europe from the territory of Russia, basically European law enforcement can do nothing about it because they are unable to trace it back to Russia. Or even if they trace it back to Russia, so what? Like they can just initiate sanctions on the company like Stormwall, but it doesn't mean that this would not be happening again and again.
All right. I actually have one more question for Anastasia, then we can go to the Q&A. Could you tell a bit more about Vatfor and Rybar? Do they have a large audience in the West? I remember at least Rybar collaborating with American influencer named Sarah Bills, who is also running the DD Geopolitics Network. So are they mostly focusing on audiences inside Russia, or do they also have an audience in the West?
So Rybar is Rybar itself, I think, appeared after the war broke out, if I'm not mistaken, and it publishes in Russian language, and it's mostly for Russian audience. But the interesting, like in a bad way, thing that we discovered is that it was cited in the beginning of the war by CNN, Bloomberg, American Institute for the Study of War. So very respectful outlets and institutions who were like reporting the positions of Russian and or Ukrainian militaries as the invasion went on. Yeah, Rybar had ties to Wagner Group, as I said earlier. Vatfor is also publishing in Russian and for Russian audience. There is a term in the Russian language which is like hey patriots, I would say. Hey patriot is like someone who supports Russia, whatever it does, like even if it loses thousands of people on the battlefield or does harm to itself by doing some wrong decisions in the battlefield, they are still supporting. So that's obvious that most probably they are getting money from a Russian state to do that, and they are targeted at the Russian audience.
All right, thank you for that. There's one more question. I will read it. It's a bit long. Anyone can take it. In your webinar title, you describe doxing as a new tool in Russian influence operations. I'm curious about this characterization. Could you clarify what makes doxing new in this context? Doxing has been a documented practice for many years and has been employed by Russian actors in previous campaigns. Are you referring to new methods or scales of doxing, new targets being pursued, or perhaps new ways it's being integrated into broader influence operations during the Ukraine conflict? I would appreciate your perspective on what specifically distinguishes the current use of doxing from its historical applications. Very good question.
I'll take this if you don't mind, Pekka. It's, yes, new in a sense, the audience, the target. So there was a, in the question you have the word target. So in this sense, it's the target, and I think that because obviously, if one is looking at the Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, this is something that's been in place since 2014 for the Ukrainians. So nothing new in this sense. So it's kind of also a realization that as Westerners, even though I'm a Pole, so I'm not sure I'm a Westerner, but okay, I play this card. This is something that we might be encountering for the first time in such a manner, but nothing new for the for Ukrainians in this sense. So in new target, yes, this is this is time-honored tradition that I tried to showcase. Different in a way that you effectively have the state apparatus. The cases we worked with previously, it was mostly sub-state actors and non-state groups actually kind of, doing doxing as an element of ideological ping pong or table tennis, if you like. The far right versus far left in Germany have been doing this for ages. But I haven't seen Germany as a state to actually do it. So that's why I mean new in a sense that this is state, new in a sense that the target is new. The scale, it might actually, the scale on one hand is larger because you suddenly have thousands of Europeans and Westerners, Americans, also South Americans, because there's plenty of them fighting for Ukraine, and they are also being doxed right there, out there. And sometimes, let's just say they function in polities that are anti-American and anti-Western. That's an interesting one. If you're coming there to fight from a South American country for money, and you are truly a mercenary for, to join Ukrainian side, but people around you back at home are usually pro-Russian, as many people in the global South unfortunately are. This is also another angle that one could take in this research, but we're focusing on Europeans mostly. So yeah, that would be my convoluted answer, if you don't mind me saying this.
Does anyone want to expand on that? Maciej or Anastasia?
Well, the main thing that we should remember is that doxing is a technological process, and as that it uses tools, and those tools change, and with access to different AI-related tools, with access to a huge amount of big data analyzing mechanisms, doxing is easier. That is one thing. The Russians are advancing in terms of technology as well. For example, those ideas to create Russia-operated or Russia-related content delivery network is a part of the process, because from the user perspective, it is a bit problematic to check whether the site that you are accessing isn't using a Russia controlled CDN, and if that you can't decide to stop using the site. So the technology is being changed, and there are new tools being developed and implemented every day. And one last thing we should really remember: it is a huge business for the Russian. It's the doxing market, like the ransomware market. Those aren't cyber criminals sitting in a dark room in a hoodie with 2 monitors and a bottle of beer. No, there are companies where people go to work at 8 a.m. and they spend 8 hours either doxing people or, for example, infecting companies with ransomware to extort them with ransom, basically to aid the Russian war machine. So that is a professional market with basically unlimited budget.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. We're going over time, but you can blame me for that. So I'm gonna ask the one more question that we had there in the Q&A. So how to protect yourself from doxing when you are partially a public figure and some of your data is already accessible through platforms like LinkedIn or even basic Google/YouTube searches. I mean, they can gather large amounts of information without needing any leaks or whatever. Moreover, recent reports suggest that FSB has access to Telegram, just as Maciej pointed out, and it's a platform many of us have been using for years. Maybe before someone answers, just briefly about leaks. Basically, many of us probably have been using social media for years, and internet is full of kind of leaks. For example, from Reddit or Facebook, they can dig out all the old stuff, like they did in my case. They can dig up a lot of old stuff, and then they can create this kind of bad image of you by combining information and then creating putting disinformation on top of that. So basically injecting disinformation within your personal information. And this is something that I have personally experienced, but maybe somebody can expand on how to protect yourself online, or is there even a way at this point to protect yourself?
The best thing you can do in terms of protecting yourself is basically understanding how the process works and deciding what data and where can you post. So for example, I have seen Polish politicians going to Ukraine with some humanitarian aid, and that is a good thing, and I'm happy that they are doing it. But probably posting the photo on social media, allowing people to identify where they were when they are at that particular place, is something that can be done like a day or two later. I like the resemblance to basically not helping people break into your apartment. So if you're going on the other part of the world for holidays, and you make some awesome photos and you want to put them on Instagram, nothing bad will happen if you will post those photos once you get back to Poland and you are at your home. People will still like the photos and envy you that you went on a nice trip, and you are not providing the information that you are at the exact place at the exact moment. So it is very simple, and it is the same thing that can be done in terms of doxing. There is lots and lots of stuff that is already available regarding ourselves online, and what we really can do is basically limit and analyze the stuff that we are really putting, and before posting anything online, ask ourselves a question: do we really need to put that information on the internet, or maybe the world will survive without that particular photo?
Okay, this is a good point to conclude. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Kacper. Thank you, Maciej. It was a fantastic event, and I feel much more intelligent now and wise after your insights. So thanks, everyone, and thanks to all participants also. And this concludes the event.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.